Testing, testing. Uh, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Testing, testing. Can y'all hear me? Test, test. Testing, testing. Cool beans. All right, I'm gonna get started here in a minute. I'm going to share this on Twitter real quick. All right, Cynthia. So I'm gonna start it at 4:30. Okay. I'm putting it's 4:20 now, so I'll start at 4:30. I'm sharing it on Twitter. Or probably like 5 till like 4:25. I'm just gonna share it real quick. I'm sharing this on Twitter, on my page, and on the ADOS Chicago Twitter page as well. All right, so hang in there if y'all listen. I'm just sharing this on like I said on Twitter. So and do me a favor and share this live as well. Share it on your Facebook page, Twitter page, YouTube. Tweet the YouTube link if you're on YouTube. Share the YouTube link with whomever. And I'm gonna grab me something to drink real quick, and then we'll get started. All right, so let's get started. Okay, I just saw your text at the. All right. Okay, so you shared it. So give it a few minutes, and I'll go ahead and I will get started. I put it in the group me too, let everybody know I was about to start. So if you are here and you're watching, give us a minute or two, and we will get started. Cynthia, we need some intro music while we wait for the start. So the what you call it won't be so dry. Hey Maria, okay, you can hear me now? Okay, great. So we're gonna start in just a second, Maria. I'm letting people share it. Do me a favor and share it as well. And in a few minutes, we're going to get started. So share it if you can. We appreciate it. And you can even text the YouTube link to folks if you want. Share it on Twitter if you're on Twitter. Okay, thank you for sharing it, Maria. Appreciate it. And anybody else in here watching, please share it. Share it on your Facebook page, and if you're on Twitter, you can tweet it, etc. I'm going to share it to one more page. I'm going to share it to the PNBC page from yesterday. and then we'll get started. Okay, we're gonna get started. I'll plug up my phone here, and then we'll jump into it. So welcome to the ADOS Chicago orientation. My name is Marlon Watson. I'm the president of ADOS Chicago, and we thank you guys and girls for joining us here. And this is basically an orientation of who ADOS is, who ADOS Chicago is, what we do, and how you can join us or help us. So thank you for joining, and we're going to get started right now. Be sure to share this live, share with your friends and family on your Facebook pages, tweet it, etc., etc. So welcome to the ADOS Chicago orientation. And so here are a few things where we cover at the ADOS orientation. And you may have heard of ADOS before in media or social media is what most likely, or you may have heard of your friends or family mention it. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you what ADOS is. So here's a few things we're going to cover. What is ADOS? Where are we economically? How did it happen? In other words, how did our economic condition or position happen? And we're going to talk about reparations, a very popular hot topic today, and it's hot because of ADOS. All right, and so here are a few ground rules. We generally, or pre-COVID, we would do this live in libraries around the city of Chicago, and we'd bring out about 40, 50 people sometime, and we'd have a really good time. So we'd always have ground rules and tell everybody to hold their questions until the end. But if you have questions, being that we're not in person or being we're virtual, you can ask your questions now during the presentation. We got our sister Cynthia McDonald in the chat, so she'll be able to answer any questions anybody has. So ignore the first ground rule. The second ground rule is no curse words. And when we say no curse words, we're not talking about the typical curse words that you may be used to, typical four-letter words. We're talking about a set of forbidden words, a set of words that we forbade as ADOS people. And we restrict these words, we restrict these phrases. We don't let politicians particularly use these phrases in our midst, especially when directed towards us. And these words, the first one is minority. We don't use minority, and we don't allow politicians to address us in that way. Second word is diversity. That's a word we restrict. We don't use that word, and we forbid politicians from doing the same. Third word, black and brown. There's nothing wrong with black necessarily, and there's nothing wrong with brown necessarily. We just have a problem when people try and use them to describe us or use them together. So that's another word we restrict, black and brown. Another word is people of color. This is a word we hear a lot today, people of color. And that's a word that references black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, and every other person that's not classified as white can be classified as people of color. But it can also be used for people that are classified as white because minorities, or not minorities, but Hispanics who are white can also use, and they do also use, people of color. So we restrict that word as well. We do not allow people to refer to us as people of color. And we reject women of color as well. So these are the curse words. These are the restricted, forbidden terms. Minority, diversity, black and brown, people of color, and women of color. We refer to ourselves and we require other people, particularly politicians, to refer to us as ADOS. Okay? Now, why do we restrict those words? Well, if you are even a political novice, you've heard of the phrase benign neglect. Well, benign neglect is an attitude or policy of ignoring an often delicate or undesirable situation that one is held to be responsible for dealing with. And so you may have heard that connected to the Nixon administration. And during the Nixon administration, when Richard Nixon was tasked with dealing with what we call the Negro problem, during his administration, there was a lot of riots and unrest, similar to today. It was probably a lot worse back then. And to deal with it, instead of directly dealing with the issues in terms of giving policy prescriptions that would actually fix the problem of poverty amongst black people, what Nixon did was create terms of benign neglect. And some of these terms were terms like states' rights and things like that ultimately harmed black people, but they weren't overt. You know, you didn't have to call black people out of their names. You didn't have to be mean to them. You just had to make up these abstract terms that would ultimately harm black folks. And so we look at those terms as benign neglect. Another concept related around that is a strategy called the Southern strategy that many of you may have heard of. Lee Atwater talks about it, and I'm not going to play this here because I don't think you'll be able to hear it. But this is a clip you can actually Google, or you can search on YouTube, Lee Atwater talking about the Southern strategy. And basically what Lee Atwater says is, in the 1980s, he said you can't say the word nigger anymore. He said you can't say nigger, 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 because it's becoming too offensive. But he said you can say things like, you can become abstract and say things like forced busing and states' rights and conservatism and things like that. And what he says is these terms harm black folk, but they do it without necessarily being upfront about the fact that you're harming black folk. So those terms, minority, people of color, black and brown, diversity, women of color, etc., are terms we consider benign neglect and a Southern strategy. And so because of that, we restrict those terms and we require people, particularly, especially politicians, to address us as ADOS, address us specifically. So again, the curse words: no minority, no diversity, no black and brown, no people of color, and no women of color, just ADOS. So now that we got the ground rules out of the way, what is ADOS? So, and this is an excerpt from Dr. Sandy Darity's book, From Here to Equality. And the book is a comprehensive book about the reparations movement. And it just came out a few months ago. And in this book, Dr. Darity basically explains what ADOS is from a particular perspective. The book says, Dr. Darity says, ADOS is a movement that blossomed in early 2019 on electronic network platforms under the label hashtag ADOS, an acronym for American Descendants of Slavery. This digital campaign asserts that Black Americans, descendant of persons enslaved in the United States, have a unique and exceptional claim on the nation's government for justice. So that's what ADOS is from the perspective of a political movement. And it said, the book says 2019, but it was actually a little earlier than that. ADOS Chicago actually started in 2018, October 2018. So we've been around a bit longer than 2019. But that's ADOS from a movement perspective, a political movement. Well, ADOS is not just a movement, it's also an ethnicity. And so what's an ethnicity? An ethnicity is the factor state of belonging to a social group that has a common national or cultural tradition. ADOS is also that. And you have people who, we're classified as Black as well in this country. That's our race. But ADOS is an ethnicity inside of that race. And we'll get a little deeper into that here in a second. So let's talk deeper about ethnicity. And we're going to do a little name association here. So I'm going to put up a picture. And if you're in the chat and you're new, and you hadn't heard this before, when I put this picture up, I want you to tell me in the chat who it is. So here it is. Who is this guy? If you're watching this and you've never seen this, or even if you've seen this, who is this guy right here? If you said Bob Marley, you're correct. This is Bob Marley. Well, question is, what is Bob Marley? Well, of course, Bob Marley is an entertainer, but in terms of outside of his profession, what is Bob Marley? Bob Marley is, if you said Jamaican, you're right. Bob Marley is Jamaican. Well, here's another guy. I'm sure you know who that is, right? That's, if you said Michael Jackson, you're correct. What is Michael Jackson? Obviously, he's an entertainer, but outside of an entertainer, what is Michael Jackson? And most people, 9 times out of 10, when we ask this question, most people say, well, Michael Jackson is Black. And you're correct. It's just one problem. When you saw Bob Marley, you say, well, Bob Marley is Jamaican, right? Well, why didn't you refer to Michael Jackson as a particular ethnic group? Because Bob Marley being Jamaican means Bob Marley has an actual ethnicity. He has an actual home, an ethnic home. But when you see Michael Jackson, you for some reason don't refer to him as a person with an ethnic home. You just refer to him as Black. When you know very well Bob Marley is Black as well. Bob Marley is as Black as Michael Jackson, right? Well, why do we do this? Why do we refer to Michael Jackson as Black and Bob Marley is Jamaican? If I were to show you a picture of Toussaint Overture, you would refer to him as Haitian. If I were to show you a picture of let's do a parallel, Toussaint Overture, you'd say he's Jamaican. If I showed you a picture of Nat Turner, you say he's Black. If I showed you a picture of What's the brother from South Africa? Nelson Mandela. You say he's South African. But if I were to show you a picture of Frederick Douglass, you'd say, well, Frederick Douglass is black. And so there's a reason we talk about black Americans outside of ethnicity, but talk about other black people inside of ethnicity. So let's get into that and try to figure out why. So first, let's understand what race and lineage is. Race is and this is the way, that I explain it, that hopefully hopefully helps it make sense. So race and lineage are two different things, but they're related. Race is, we're classified as a particular race as black, but lineage is something that lives inside of race. And it applies to white people too. So white people are classified as white, but they have lineages. They have German and Irish and Italian and Jewish, etc. Well, this is a way to help understand race and lineage. Race is the street we all live on as people classified as black. In other words, if I'm in China or Canada, if I'm in Alabama or Alaska, if I see a black person, I know I see somebody from my street. I see somebody from Black Street. Lineage, on the other hand, is the house we all individually live on that street. So on Black Street, Haitians have a home, Jamaicans have a home, Nigerians have a home. They all have a home on Black Street. The only people that hadn't had a home for so long are Black Americans. And that's why when you see Michael Jackson, you reference him as a black person. But when you see Bob Marley or Toussaint Overture or Nelson Mandela, you refer to them as their particular ethnicity. It's because everybody understands and knows that those guys and girls have an ethnic home. But Black Americans, well, we're just black. So essentially, we're on Black Street, but we're homeless on that street because we've never been defined as an ethnicity. Well, ADOS is that ethnicity. ADOS is that lineage. It's an American descendant of slavery. And it's such a lineage that it doesn't allow anybody but you to claim that lineage. So in essence, it locks you into the lineage and it locks other people out. Because no matter how much people are attracted to or like Black Americans, if they don't have an ancestor that can trace their lineage back to American slavery, they can't claim ADOS. And no matter how much you as an ADOS person dislike Black people or dislike ADOS, if you have ancestry that goes back to American plantation, you are ADOS. So it locks everybody else out and locks you in. And why is that important? Well, let's get into, before I say this, let me explain something as well. The term African American, that's a term we've used for some decades or so. And that was a term that was around actually in the early 1800s. Just wasn't popular, but Jesse Jackson popularized it in the mid 1900s, or I would say 1970s or 80s, somewhere around there. And that became a term we used because, again, it gave us identity. But that term is problematic because it allows everybody who's Black in America to say they're African American. Well, you need something that includes you, that insulates you, and excludes everybody else. And that's what ADOS is. It locks you in and locks everyone else out of that classification. So let's cover why that's important. Why do you need a lineage to lock you out of a class, to lock you in and lock everyone else out? Well, just using the analogy that the lineage or ethnicity is the home on the street, on Black Street, just using that, it could make sense because in a home, you protect all your valuables, your family, your checkbook, Everything that's valuable to you is protected in home. Well, if it's the same in the lineage space, if you live on Black Street and you don't have an ethnic home, everything you own and create is subject to plunder. And so this is why it's important to understand and claim a particular lineage. So let's get a little deeper into that. Let's look at lineage from a public perspective. Most people aren't familiar with the fact that there is a Congressional Caribbean Caucus. I know we've all heard of the Congressional Black Caucus, but have you heard of the Congressional Caribbean Caucus? Well, that's the thing that actually exists. What about the Congressional Nigerian Caucus? Well, that's a thing too. That's an actual caucus in Congress. Here's a quote from the African Immigrant Caucus. The African Immigrant Caucus says, other ethnic groups have a seat at the table and are getting their issues heard. Why not us? So as you can see, other Black people in America, other people in America who are classified as Black, they have their own caucuses. And this is just a brief example. There are several governmental spaces that they use for themselves, which is a good thing. We're not opposed to that. But the problem becomes they have those caucuses. And being that I'm not a Caribbean person, I'm not a Nigerian person, I'm not a person whose ancestors are directly from, who's considered who's an African, I can't access or use those caucuses for anything for myself, for my group. But they can turn around and use the Congressional Black Caucus. So they're able to go to their caucuses, use those resources, and then come to the Congressional Black Caucus and then use those resources, while ADOS is stuck in just the Congressional Black Caucus. Okay. Well, let's look at it from a private space. Have you ever heard of Midwest Jamaican Corps? Now, we live in Chicago, and 40 minutes north of Chicago is Evanston. And Evanston has a healthy Jamaican population. And they have different organizations specifically for Jamaicans, which is okay, such as the Midwest Jamaican Corps. What about the Nigerian American Professionals Association? What about scholarships? You can go to scholarships.org or any scholarship website, and you can find scholarships specific to Jamaicans or Haitians or whatever the case may be. And that's fine. They can use those things and those institutions for themselves. But I can't. I can't go to the West Jamaican Corps and get anything because I'm not Jamaican. I can't go to the Nigerian American Professional Association and expect to benefit in any way because I'm not Nigerian. I can't find a scholarship for Haitian American and use it for myself because I'm not Haitian. But they can, on the other hand, they can turn around and use the United Negro College Fund because they're Black. So essentially, they're being allowed to double dip from their pot of resources into ours, and we're stuck in just ours. So hopefully you can better see why you need an ethnicity. An ethnicity protects your culture, it protects your lineage, it protects the things that you built for your group. Let's look a little bit deeper at ADOS by the numbers. So now understanding that ADOS is an ethnic group, is a lineage, I want to show you a little trick that America plays on us. And this is just the Chicago metropolitan area. It says the Chicago metropolitan area has the third largest African American population behind only New York City and Atlanta. And look at these ethnic groups below here. It says the main ethnic groups in Chicago include Irish, German, Italian, Mexican, Assyrian, Arab, Bangladeshi, Jewish, English, Bosnian, Croatian, Bulgarian, Czech, Greek, Black, Korean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what you're seeing is a bunch of white ethnic groups. Well, in the city of Chicago is split up in thirds. 30% of Chicago is Black, 30% is white, and 30% is Hispanic. Those are the numbers that constitute the city, and about 10% is other. Well, they say we're a minority, but the ADOS population in the city of Chicago is about 90 plus 95% of the Black population. While inside of the white population, you have German, Italian, Irish, etc. Those are all ethnic groups too. And the largest of those is German. German is about 15% of the city of Chicago. So if they're 15% of the city of Chicago, or they're 15% of the white population in the city of Chicago, and 30% of the city is white, and ADOS is 90% of the Black population in Chicago, and 30% of the city is Black, we're larger than the largest white ethnic group. And then when you get to the Hispanic group, 30% of Chicago is Hispanic, but in that group, you have Mexicans, you have Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, so on and so forth, a bunch of different Hispanic groups. And the Mexican group is probably 20% of that. But we're still considered a minority. When in actuality, as it relates to ethnic groups, we're the largest ethnic group in the city of Chicago. So you see how they kind of play games with us? You need to classify yourself, and we need to classify ourselves as ethnicities and not a race. The ethnicity is where your protection is. All right? So now that we hopefully understand ethnicity and ADOS a little bit better, let's look at how to advocate as an ADOS person or an ADOS institution. This is a tweet by the NAACP. And the NAACP, the National Association for Colored People, for the advancement of colored people. Colored people was supposed to be us, but now the NAACP includes other people outside of ADOS. So look at this tweet they tweeted back in April, 23rd of April. The NAACP said this legislation is a desperately needed first step to helping small businesses owned by people of color and located in undeserved areas which are hardest hit by COVID-19. So they just talked about people of color. Okay. And we know who people of color are today. Everybody's a person of color that's not a white person. And even sometimes you can be a white person and still be a person of color. So this is how the NAACP advocates today. Look at the Black Caucus. Back in April, the 16th of April, they tweeted, African American lawmakers, the Trump administration isn't doing enough to help minorities with the coronavirus. Now, we restrict that word. Well, who's a minority? Everybody's a minority, except for white men. Hispanics are minorities. Indonesians are minorities, or Indians are minorities, Native Americans, white women. I believe the LGBT community is classified as minority now. Handicapped folks are minority. Everybody's a minority now. Well, let's look at the Black Caucus tweet from the 15th of April. 2.8 million immigrants and our healthcare professionals putting their lives at risk to take care of their patients. They must all, no matter their immigration status, be included in any COVID relief package. So why is the Congressional Black Caucus talking about immigrants? Well, it's because Black people who are immigrants can use the Congressional Black Caucus. But Black people who aren't immigrants can't use the immigrant caucuses. Now, look at how the Hispanic caucus advocates. The Hispanic caucus said around 49% of Hispanics say they or someone in their household has taken a pay cut or lost a job, or both, because of the COVID-19 outbreak, compared with 33% of all U.S. adults. Then they say the next recovery package must do more for Latino communities. Well, didn't the Black Caucus and the NAACP just advocate for the Latino community when they said people of color and when they said minorities? So you have the Black Caucus and the NAACP advocating for minorities and people of color. Then you have the advocating for Hispanics. You don't notice an imbalance there? They get 100% of their advocacy and like 70, 80% of our advocacy. And that's because we won't define ourselves as an ethnicity. And that's what ADOS is seeking to do. So now that we see what ADOS is, and we're going to get deeper into the presentation in a sec, we're going to really drive this point home in this game we play called In the House. So I'm going to show you a series of pictures, and when you see this person, I want you to tell me if they're in the house, if they're ADOS or not, okay? The first contestant is Dr. King and Coretta Scott King. Well, they are absolutely ADOS, and in fact, the term descendants of slavery was in part coined by Dr. King himself. In his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Dr. King calls us descendants of slaves. So he and Mrs. King are ADOS approved. The second contestant, you may know this fellow. If you don't, this is Mr. Booker T. Washington. And if you know anything about Booker T, he is ADOS approved. Third contestant, W.E.B. Du Bois, without a doubt, ADOS approved. Madam C.J. Walker, ADOS approved. How about this fellow, Marcus Mosiah Garvey? Many of us adore Mr. Garvey. I do too. But is he ADOS? No. Marcus Garvey is Jamaican. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's just not ADOS. And so what's really important to understand outside of just the ethnic piece in general is when it comes to things like, general advocacy, but definitely reparations, which is the payment for the injury of slavery, Jim Crow, etc. Marcus Garvey would be excluded from that. Or Marcus Garvey descendants would be excluded from that in this country. He and his descendants would get reparations from England, I believe. I believe England colonized Jamaica. And they have an organization called CARICOM. CARICOM fights for reparations for those in the Caribbean islands. And they give reparations to the descendants of those enslaved in those Caribbean islands. In fact, Jamaica has said if a Jamaican leaves Jamaica and Jamaica happens to get reparations, well, their reparations follow them. And it should. And so, in that vein, well, and before I say that, if I were to go to Jamaica as a non-Jamaican Black, I couldn't get access to the reparations that the Jamaicans there should receive. And it's the same in America. If you are a descendant of American slavery, in the event reparations becomes a reality, you get excluded from that legislation. So let's go to the next contestant. The Minister Farrakhan. Love Minister Farrakhan, right? But Minister Farrakhan, from my understanding, unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, Minister Farrakhan is Caribbean on both sides, right? So what does that mean? It just simply means he's not ADOS. Now you can be, you can have ADOS lineage on a side, and that makes you ADOS. sort of like Malcolm X. Malcolm X's, I think, father was ADOS. His mother was Caribbean. Well, that makes Malcolm X ADOS. But if both your parents are Caribbean or both your parents are of African descent or African, then you aren't ADOS. And from what I understand, Minister Farrakhan, as much as we like him, he's just not ADOS. So in the event reparations will come, he would be excluded. How about these two folks? Michelle Obama. Well, Michelle Obama is ADOS, but Barack Obama is not. And so that would make their children ADOS because they have one ADOS parent. But in the event of reparations, Barack Obama, well, Michelle Obama would receive them. Their children would receive them, but Barack Obama would not. And if you don't know who this lady is, I feel sorry for you. This is the founder of ADOS, co-founder, Yvette Carnell. And she's triple ADOS approved. And you can actually find her on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and search Yvette Carnell or Breaking Brown, and you'll find her channel. And you can, and we want you to subscribe to her channel and listen to her broadcast every Monday and Wednesday at 9:30 Central Time, and learn some of these ADOS lessons. So she is 100% ADOS approved. What about this fellow and this guy? Well, the first guy is ADOS approved, as is the second guy. And the first guy is Antonio Moore. He's also a co-founder of ADOS, and you can find his channel on YouTube. Just search Antonio Moore or Tone Talks, and you can watch his broadcast every Friday evenings, and get some of these ADOS lessons. Well, this fellow here is Dr. Darry. He's also ADOS, and he is the author of From Here to Equality, and he does much of the data that ADOS uses in our advocacy, and he's also ADOS. Well, if you are one of my Facebook friends, you probably know this guy. This is Brian Mullins. He doesn't look ADOS, but he's ADOS. He's a friend and an advocate of ADOS Chicago. We often call him Cuban or Puerto Rican because he looked like he might be, but he's ADOS. And this last picture is many of the folks from ADOS Chicago. This is a trip we took to Springfield sometime last year, where we went to lobby a bill we created, House Bill 4260, and that was to create an ethnic grouping for ADOS people in the state of Illinois. And you can actually go look at that bill, House Bill 4260, on the state of Illinois government website. And so this was us in our state capitol, right in front of the rotunda. And everybody in that picture is ADOS. And so now you see what ADOS is. And hopefully we've driven the point home. And if you have an ancestor who can trace their lineage back to American slavery, well, you're ADOS. And so, in that vein, welcome home. Welcome home, ADOS. You are officially an ethnicity. You have your own lineage. You have a home on Black Street. And now you can seek to protect your loved ones, your culture, your creations, your property, intellectual and otherwise, in your home called ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, the group that built the richest, most wealthiest country on the planet. That's you. So welcome home. All right, so that's what ADOS is. ADOS is American Descendants of Slavery. It's an ethnicity, it's a lineage, it's an identity, and it's a movement. So now that we know who we are, let's find out where we are economically. And this is a clip by Antonio Moore. Let me see if I can. I'm going to try to play this here. And hopefully you can hear it. If you can hear this, and let me know. All right, so you probably, I don't know if you heard that video, but that was Antonio Moore explaining. Okay, yeah, Cynthia says she couldn't hear the audio. All right, so anyway, that was Antonio Moore explaining this chart. And this chart is the racial wealth gap. And the top line here, you can see since the 80s, it charts data since 1983, and it shows the median household net worth of white families in America. So it got all the way up to about 160,000. Took a strong dip around the recession of 2008, and these are projected numbers, but it's actually right about another 150, 60,000 right now. So the median household net worth for white families in America is $150,000. Well, for ADOS in America, we've just about been flat since we've been here. We had some glimmers of hope, and it fell right back off. So our median household net worth is $1,700 versus again $150,000 for white families. And what that means is everything you look at in the ADOS community as it relates to dysfunction, violence, and things of nature, it can all be figured out in this gap. W.E.B. Du Bois says, to be poor is hard, but to be a poor people in a land full of dollars is the bottom of hardship. And so just like any other in this country, when they were poor, they had violence, gang violence, dysfunction. When the Italian community was poor, they had tremendous amounts of violence. Right here in the city of Chicago, just recently, in fact, a few months ago, there was a gang rivalry, and it was in the ADOS community. And coming out of the funeral, 15 people were shot. Nobody was murdered, nobody was killed, but 15 people were shot by a rival gang over on 79th and Carpenter. Well, about 40 years before that, Al Capone's gang from the Italian community shot 20 people coming out of a funeral and killed 10. Well, since then, the Italian community has been made an American community, and the black community has not. The ADOS community has not. If you consider the Irish community in pretty much anywhere in America, but particularly here in the city of Chicago, when the Irish community was poor, they had gangs and fights and violence and dysfunction. But now the Irish community basically owns the police department. The Irish community has their part of America. The Italian community has their part of America. Jewish community has their part of America. And so you don't see violence and crime and dysfunction like you do in our community because we've never been made fully American. And all those issues you see in our community, if we were able to close this wealth gap, where we had a commensurate amount of wealth and income as white people, you'd see those things dry up. So how did this happen? What created this wealth gap? Well, it wasn't hickory smoked bacon, as you see in this picture. It was cotton. I just showed a picture of bacon because that bacon from a company called King Cotton. And King Cotton is an actual company, believe it or not. And it's a meat packing company in the South, and they sell meat. But King Cotton is an actual phrase that was coined by James Hammond, a Southern plantation owner in the United States Senate. And James Hammond said, way back in the 1800s, that without firing a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? I will not stop to depict what everyone can imagine. But this is certain. England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her, save the South. No, you dare not make war on cotton. No power on earth dares to make war upon it. Cotton is king. Well, Senator Hammond just told you that cotton fueled the entire industrial world at one point, during the time of enslavement, to be exact. And our ancestors picked that cotton. They not only picked the cotton, they picked the tobacco, the fruit, they cut the grass, shoveled the snow, nursed the children, built the schools, built the homes, built the White House, and created multi-generational in businesses and empires for white people, but were locked out of the wealth since emancipation. And this is what created that wealth gap. Now let's look at cotton a little more deep, more granularly. So this is just the Mississippi cotton production over a few years. In 1833, 70 million pounds of cotton was produced. In 1839, 193 million pounds was produced. 49, 194 million pounds. And in 1859, on the eve of the Civil War, 535 million pounds of cotton was produced. And on the eve of the Civil War, or prior to that, cotton was about 10, 15 cents a pound. In the late 1850s, cotton got to being worth $1.30-something a pound. This is just in Mississippi. So this is the wealth that our ancestors created. And it was used to build empires. It was used to build companies. It was used to build families, build generational wealth. And it was used to build the richest country in the world. And we've been locked out of that wealth since. Right after emancipation, America actually created a Freedmen's Bureau and a Freedmen's Bank. And they issued Field Order 50, was the directive that were to give formerly enslaved people 40 acres and a mule. And so with that 40 acres and a mule, and with that bank and that bureau, our ancestors were going to be able to create an American life for themselves, and we would be able to experience that American life right now. But shortly after that, America actually started to issue the 40 acres, and they actually started issuing old, used war mules right off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia. Well, shortly after that, President Lincoln was assassinated. The Freedmen Bureau and Bank was defunct and defunded. That land and those mules were confiscated, and those enslaved folk, formerly enslaved folk, were put right back on the plantations they were freed from. So white folk were able to take that money, build generational wealth, build empires, build the richest country in the world, and we've been locked out of that ever since. And so this is somewhat of a timeline of that experience. 1600, 1619, the start of American slavery, or start of slavery. American slavery didn't start till 1776 because there wasn't an America then. And so in 1776, independence adopted. In 1863, emancipation came. And people often think, well, that was, after emancipation, that was it. Well, I just told you that they started to re-enslave those same enslaved people. So much so that in 1942, the sitting president then had to issue a circular 3591. You can Google it. And that circular made slavery illegal. Well, why would they have to make slavery illegal in 1942? Because clearly people were still enslaving us in 1942. So slavery wasn't that far ago. And all of that enslavement and all of that wealth creation and all of the process of locking us out has now created the wealth gap we just saw. And this wealth gap is nationwide. And when you take a look at this report, the Color of Wealth report done by Dr. William Darity, it actually breaks down in major cities what the wealth data looks like amongst blacks who are immigrants, blacks who are ADOS, Latins, whites, and Asians. And so in the city of Los Angeles, the U.S. black is worth $4,000. Well, the black immigrant is worth $72,000, Latinx negative $3,500, whites $355,000, and Asians $298,000. In the city of Miami, U.S. blacks U.S. blacks $3,700, black immigrants $12,000, Latin 22, whites 100,000. And the city of Boston, $8 for ADOS. That's our net worth. Well, black immigrants are worth $18,000. Latin 4,000, whites 250,000. And in the District of Columbia, ADOS is worth 3,500. Black immigrants 3,000, whites 280,000, Asians 428,000. And this is the wealth gap broken down in per city, but all across this country, ADOS families are at the economic bottom. And here's a chart created by Antonio Moore, and it shows the wealth data in strata, different strata. So the ultra elite are families worth $6 million or more. And these are families that generally attend Harvard, do legacy building, .com startups like Zuckerberg and folks like that. And in that strata, the ultra elite, there are less than a few thousand black families. Well, in the elite strata, those are families worth 1.2 or more. And these families generally are able to send their kids to law school, do community development, open restaurants, etc. There are less than 340,000 black families in that strata. Well, in the good strata, and these are families worth $500,000 to 1.2 million. And these are generally families who can send their kids to, University of Georgia, pay off student loans, have a retirement. Less than a million. In fact, 750,000 black families are in that strata. And with the average families worth between 110,000 and $500,000. These are families who generally don't go to college, maybe a trade school. They're workers, W-2 workers, possibly Uber drivers for additional income, etc. The rest of Black America, ADOS America particularly, are in that strata, which ultimately gives us a negative net worth. So this is just showing how we look economically in that sense. And this is that charted out. So if you look over here in the highlighted area, the bottom 50% of Black American households are worth less than $1. And in fact, it's a total negative of $4.4 billion. And because of the period of enslavement and Jim Crow and subsequent wealth exclusion, this is where we are as a community. And right here in the city of Chicago is where it has one of the worst wealth gaps in the country. Right here in the NPR News website, it says Chicago owns America's widest racial wealth gap in economic mobility. And here's just a breakdown of poor residents within the city of Chicago. And as you can see over here, the kind of purple line, that's Black families in the city of Chicago, and the greenish line is in the state of Illinois. We're the most impoverished families in this city and state. When you look at income, if you look at this purple line, most families below the poverty line in the city of Chicago. Here's a Harvard economist about the wealth gap right here in Chicago. Harvard economist Ross says that for white Americans, achieving the American dream is like climbing an income ladder. If you've climbed up in one generation, that's basically where you're going to start, the next generation. And then you can climb up further. But for Black Americans, and Black men in particular, it's like being on a treadmill, where even after you've climbed up in one generation, there are tremendous structural forces that make it highly likely you're going to fall back down in the next generation, and then you have to make the climb again. Look at Black male unemployment in the city of Chicago. And this was 2014 data, so it's worse now, particularly with the COVID crisis. 7% of whites are unemployed, while 21% of Black men are unemployed. Not in the labor force, 39% of whites aren't in the labor force, while 52% of Blacks aren't in the labor force, Black men. And again, this is pre-COVID. Well, because of those incarceration numbers, Black men incarcerated in the United States comprise more than all these countries collectively. India, Argentina, Lebanon, Cambodia, Japan, Germany, Finland, Israel, England. We have more Black men incarcerated in this country than all the people incarcerated in all of these countries. In fact, there are more Black men in prison in this country than there are women in prison around the globe. Look at American incarceration per 100,000 by gender and race. White women, 129 per 100,000. Black women, 332 per 100,000. White men, 900 per 100,000. Black men, 5,000 per 100,000. And working age Black men, almost 9,000 per 100,000 are incarcerated. And though the numbers were small for Black women, when Black men are incarcerated, it affects Black women in a different way. This study says eviction rates for Black women are on par with incarceration rates for Black men. So as we are incarcerated, Black women are evicted. And so let's look a little further at the wealth data. Many people say, well, what does it mean in quintiles? Let's look at the median household net worth by quintiles. Many people suggest that there are some black families doing okay. Well, let's look at those black families. So in this first quintile here, the white bar are white families, the red bar are black families. And in that quintile, the white family is worth 518,000, and the black one is worth 262,000. One quintile lower, the white family is worth 200,000, black 83,000. One quintile lower, the white family is worth 100,000, black 22,000. Below that, the white family is worth 60,000, black family is 7,600. Then the white family is 18,000, and the black family is 200. So even in the same strata, we can't seem to be on par with white folk. We'll look at it as it relates to employment status. White folks that are full-time employed are worth 144,000, while blacks 11,000. Whites who are out of labor are worth 75,000, but blacks who are out of labor are worth 1,700. Whites who are unemployed are worth 55,000, while blacks who are unemployed are worth $1,300. Some people say, well, it's because blacks need to focus on education. Well, let's look at those who are educated compared to whites. Whites with post-college are worth 455,000, while blacks are worth 141,000. White families with college, undergrad, are worth 268,000, while blacks are worth 70,000. Whites with some college, 135,000. Blacks with some college, 18,000. Whites with high school, 118,000. Blacks with high school, 6,000. Whites with less than high school, 82,000. Blacks with less than high school, $2,000. And if you notice, whites with less than high school are worth more than blacks with undergrad degrees. Even when it comes to health, health is wealth. So poor people over here in this top charts here, poor people experience more stress, more worry, physical pain, more sadness, and more anger. Right here in Chicago, in the neighborhood of Inglewood, the average life expectancy is 60 years old, and Inglewood is the black part of town. Well, Lakeview, the average life expectancy is 90 years of age. Lakeview is the white part of town. Dr. Darity says the wealth gap is the single most important indicator of economic well-being. And so we've just gone through the wealth data for educated folks, for non-educated folks, full-time, non-full-time employed, employed, unemployed, you name it. We've showed you the disparity between blacks and whites as it relates to wealth and income. So what is the solution? Well, we've just seen, let's talk about what the solution isn't first. We've just seen that education isn't the solution. And some people may say, well, black people just need to do better as it relates to entrepreneurship. We need to do black capitalism, or what many people say, do for self. Well, let's see if that's the solution. I want you to look up, and I'm going to give you some snippets from this study, but I want you to look up a study called Not for Lack of Trying. And this study basically shows entrepreneurship in America in black and white, and it studied the black businesses and white businesses, and it studied the propensity to start businesses amongst those groups, the mindsets, and what has caused those businesses to fail and succeed. Well, here's an excerpt from that study. It says we find Black Americans to show an above average propensity to start a business, while white Americans are less likely to engage in business startups than our sample average. Our main finding that Blacks are more likely to try starting businesses than whites is new and potentially very important, as it suggests that constraints and not preferences are behind racial differences in business ownerships. In other words, it's not because Black people aren't trying. There are some other impediments that causes Black people to fail at business. And the study says we start more businesses than white people, but we still have a much larger fail rate. This clip says, well, this excerpt says, our results also show that even after controlling for both socioeconomic and perceptual variables, Black Americans are still more likely to start a business than white Americans. These results are surprising since it has been shown that the gains from self-employment to minorities are comparatively smaller, and therefore that minority individuals should have lower incentives to become self-employed. Here's another very interesting excerpt from that study. It says, by the fact that Black Americans are more self-confident, so this speaks to people always talking about, mindset. Black people need to change their mindset. Well, this study says, by the fact that Black Americans are more self-confident in their entrepreneurial skills, exhibit higher alertness to business opportunities, and are less sensitive to fear of failure, given the lack of panel data, we are not able to unequivocally determine the direction of casualty between perceptual variables and entrepreneurial activity. However, we find some evidence that these subjective and possibly biased perceptions may contribute to increased entrepreneurial propensities. Regardless of casualty, the fact of the matter is that Blacks seem to perceive themselves and their entrepreneurial environment in a much more optimistic light than whites. In other words, there is nothing wrong with the mindset of Black people. In fact, we have a better mindset as it relates to business. We try harder as it relates to business when it comes to comparing us to white people and even Hispanic people. This is about business and our youth. It says our results are consistent with Walstead and Korlisky, who investigated the attitudes toward education in and knowledge of entrepreneurship of Black youth using results from a national survey. Their study found Black youth to exhibit a stronger desire to start businesses than white youth. Let me read that again. Their study found Black youth exhibit a stronger desire to start businesses than white youth, to want more entrepreneurship taught in their schools, and to believe successful entrepreneurs have a responsibility to give back to the community. I hope you caught that. Even our youth have a better mindset when it comes to business. So what am I saying? What am I showing you is that it's not mindset. It's not us needing to do for self. The study determined that the problem is our lack of wealth primarily and lack of other resources that white families tend to have. And so if you look at all the businesses that Black people have, 96% of them are non-employer firms. In other words, just one person with an LLC that does whatever they do. Let's see something else Black people do that may shock you. This is a reading snapshot. And it discovered that, this is a study done by Pew Research, it discovers that women read more than men, which is not surprising, but that Black people read more than white people and Hispanics. Take a look. Black people, 81%. Whites, 76%. Hispanics, 67%. So we've done what we're supposed to do. We've gotten the education. We still can't seem to be on par with white people as it relates to wealth and income. We start businesses more. We have a better mindset. We work harder. We read more. We can't seem to keep up with the wealth status of our counterparts. And I'm not going to play this clip. You probably won't be able to hear it, but this is Dr. King right before his assassination. And he talks about how when white peasants came to America, America undergirded them with land and land grant colleges to help them mechanize the land, and they just gave it to them. Then he said, America has never done the same for the Negro. And he says that in this campaign, when we go to Washington this time, we're going to get our check. So what is the solution to all the issues we just talked about? The solution is twofold. One, it's a demand on local equity. And local equity means in the cities and states you live in, it's a demand of a commensurate amount of state, county, and city resources. In other words, in the city of Chicago, again, we're 30% of the city, yet we get very little, if any, resources. We're, I think, 3% of the unions. We get like 5% of the union contracts. Our children make up 50% of the school system, yet the school system staff, as it relates to teachers and other staff, is like 20 or 30% black. So many resource inequities. And on a local level, we have to demand those things for our community. So that's one part of the fix. The second part of the fix, and this is the ultimate fix, is reparations. And reparations is a payment for the injury of what created the wealth gap. Slavery, Jim Crow, and the economic exclusion of ADOS people created the wealth gap. And reparations is a repayment of that. And so Dr. William Darity, in his studies, it said he's discovered that what could close the racial wealth gap, the wealth gap we showed you a few slides ago, is a $10 to $12 trillion federal reparations program. And that may sound like a large number, but this is something that's given out over generations. And it's not a far-fetched thing to do, because we just saw the American government print trillions of dollars and give it out over the matter of months via the COVID crisis. So America's saying that, well, how are we going to pay for it? Well, we know how we're going to pay for it, just like we paid for COVID relief. All right. So the fix, again, to the problem of the racial wealth gap is a federal program of reparations. And that's a $10 to $12 trillion price tag that would be distributed over multiple generations. It would include a portfolio of things, largely cash. Other things would be grants for homes and businesses. And this federal program will close the racial wealth gap. And the local program, or local equity, in terms of a commensurate amount of resources on a local level, would help maintain the closure of the racial wealth gap. And that is it. With all the ADOS stuff we talked about, ADOS still has a black agenda. So on the federal level, reparations is strictly for ADOS, and excludes everybody else except ADOS. But on a local, we do have a black agenda. And one of the things we're doing here in the city of Chicago is working to get that black agenda realized through the signing of an executive order. And that executive order is the Rapid Relief Executive Order for Black Illinois citizens. And you can actually go to itshardbeingblack.info to find out more about that executive order. You can actually sign a petition. And when you sign that petition, it would send out an email to all our state reps, to the governor, the Speaker of the House. And we've chose the name It's Hard Being Black because Governor Pritzker, when George Floyd was murdered, did a press conference saying, I know it's hard being black and we have to do something about it. And so we took that and ran with it. And the something about it is this executive order. So if you're in the state of Illinois and you want to help us get this local policy done for ADOS people and black people in the state of Illinois, go to itshardbeingblack.info, sign a petition, and help us get this initiative done. And that is primarily the presentation. You can find us at adoschicago.org. Again, you can go to itshardbeingblack.info. And here are a list of websites for ADOS in general. ADOSchicago.org, Illinois ADOSequity.org. That's our local. You can donate to our local PAC and help us do local work. Again, itshardbeingblack.info is the executive order site. And ADOS101.com is the ADOS national site where you can go look and take a look at our national platform and how you can get involved, etc. So that's ADOS. That's ADOS Chicago. Thank you for joining us. We hope it was helpful. We hope you learned something. And let us know. Go to the ADOS Chicago website, adoschicago.org. And again, if you're in Illinois, please go sign that petition at itshardbeingblack.info and help us get this executive order signed for Black people in the state of Illinois. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Sunday. Same time, same time. Peace. Thanks, Didi Barnes. Didi Barnes says she just signed it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I'm going to say it again. If you're in here, guys and girls, and you want to help us with this initiative, go sign that petition. So thank you again, Didi Barnes. We appreciate that. All right, Martise says, thank you for the presentation. Learned a lot. Well, we're glad you attended the presentation, Martise. And we do these every Sunday at 4 o'clock. So feel free to chime in. We'll try to switch the presentation up a little bit to make it a little different every time. Maybe put more information in it. But every Sunday at 4, we'll be doing these. And we ask people to share when we do these so we can get more ADOS awareness around the country. And speaking of awareness, yeah, sign that petition, Marty. Appreciate that. And speaking of awareness, the month of October, we're getting ready to take the month of October reparations month, reparations awareness month. So my church, the Avalon Park Community Church over on 8100 South Dante, is going to preach reparations sermons, justice sermons, all throughout the month of October. And we're going to deem it Reparations Month. And we're going to... thank you, Cynthia. All right, Cynthia said, great presentation. All right, you're doing the next one, Cynthia. The next presentation is on you. No, but the month of October is going to be Reparations Month. And our church is going to deem it Reparations Month, and we're looking to get other churches involved. We just did a presentation or a panel with Progressive National Baptist Church, and that's Dr. King's denomination, if you don't know. And they are teaming up with ADOS, and we're coming to get our check, and hopefully we can get them in tune with Reparations Month. And I mean, if you could just imagine all churches preaching, or all churches that take this initiative, preaching reparations throughout the month of October, all the way leading up to the election, and doing it every year to put America on notice to say that this is what you owe this community, reparations. And I'm convinced that just like with the civil rights movement, it took the Black church to get it done. I think reparations is going to take the Black church to get it done. And so we're taking the lead on that and making it Reparations Month, and we hope to get other churches to adopt that mantle as well. And so that is the presentation, you all. Here in a minute, probably at about 15 minutes, I'm going to do a rebroadcast of the panel from yesterday. And that panel had myself, Yvette Carnell, Pastor Kevin Cosby from St. Stephen's. It had ADOS DMV. It had ADOS Indianapolis, ADOS Detroit, Ja'Cory Arthur, the Louisville representative that just got elected, the ADOS representative that just won his seat down there, and several ministers from the PNBC, the Progressive National Baptist Convention. It was their social justice commission on the panel, and it was a great time. And we talked about what ADOS was and how they can partner with us to get the mission of reparations accomplished. So I'm going to rebroadcast that at 6 o'clock. It's about an hour and a half. So stay tuned. And if you want to see that, again, stay tuned. I'm going to rebroadcast that in about 10 minutes. All right. All right, guys. Thank you. Talk to you soon.